What's up, guys? Bet you thought you'd seen the last of me. Not yet. We got a great show coming your way. 2 hours of Gojo and Golic. T is for tag. Apparently the Bengals are throwing the franchise tag on T. Higgins. We'll break it all down. Plus, Emmanuel Acho says the Cowboys are just one Eagles offseason away from a Super Bowl. Question mark? We will discuss. And the fix is in. The NBA All-Star Tournament needs some help. Adam Silver has ideas. Does anybody really care? We'll talk about all that and more. 2 hours of Gojo and Golic right now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield back in the saddle here. We got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe and hit the bell on the Gojo and Golic YouTube channel as well. Fun one coming up. Jesse mentioned All-Star Game fixes. We'll talk to David Dennis Jr. from Anscape about what the experience is like at the All-Star Game, if this is even worth fixing anymore, or if this is just a thing we do when we're bored this week when we don't have actual games to talk about. Jason Fitz will also stop by for his usual Tuesday bout of fun. College football playoff looks like it's going to expand again, and I don't know if a lot of people realize that there are only two people that control what's going to happen next. So we will get to all of that. Jesse, back with us coming off President's Day, which is one of those government holidays, guys, where I'm always curious, like, who actually treats it like real? How much seriousness do we give all of this? I'm glad that, Jesse, you, and it sounds like your nanny got to enjoy this, but this is one that it feels like people just kind of get to pick and choose if they actually look at or not.
Well, if you have kids, you know that there's no school on federal holidays. So if it's a federal holiday, which means banks are closed, the stock market's closed, post office, blah, 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 all that's closed. So my nanny gets federal holidays off. So did I enjoy the holiday? Let's see. I was home by myself with the kids alone all day. So very questionable if that was a break or not. But yeah, federal holidays. I don't know when companies stopped recognizing all the federal holidays.
Yeah, President's Day is one of those. The only thing that made me realize it was President's Day was all the President's Day sales going on. The mattresses on sale, all the different things on sale. I'm like, oh, it's President's Day. It's a holiday. At least for federal workers, it's a holiday. Everybody else is basically working. But yeah, this is kind of this is a day off of work for some people day.
Well, and Jesse brought up the real trick bag in all of this, and this is the same I was thinking about the other day because I had friends who lived in the Midwest who were dealing with kids home on snow days, and it's just what Jesse described as you're at home with all your kids, and I don't know if there is anything that ages worse as you get older than a snow day. The idea of a surprise day off of school where as a kid, I remember, especially back in the day, you're sitting there watching the local news, scanning the bottom line, waiting for your school to scroll through because you couldn't check online. You couldn't find that anywhere. You had one source for that stuff, and it was the local news to go and see it. And you're waiting there with bated breath, checking out your school district, seeing if you got the day off. And I did not realize, Dad, on the other side of this, how hard you guys had to be praying that they were going to find a way to ship our asses to school.
I mean, that is so true. From a kid's side of it, man, you know exactly. You either listen on the radio. Back when I was a kid, you listened on the radio, or it was on the bottom line of the local news. The dichotomy of the child and the parent is palpable, without question. You know, the parent trying not to sound like ship your ass off to school, kid, and just waiting to see, but praying, but just knowing deep down inside. Now, they didn't give off of school as easily when I was a kid as when you guys were kids.
Yeah.
I mean, you basically, it had to be almost shut down the city for us to not have school. And it was to the point where if the school buses weren't running or were late, we would have to walk to school because my dad worked and my mom worked. Yeah. So it would be like, well, yeah, there's school, but the buses aren't running, but you got to walk to school. So, I mean, it was double trouble if you didn't get the day off. But if you got the day off, it was like, oh, now my ma had to call in and take off of work because, you know, we didn't have nannies back then. So she had to watch us, and we were happy as a pig in slop just going out and playing in the snow. But, man, it took everything in the world to get a snow day when I was a kid. Damn,
they said y'all going to get this social studies, and you are going to like it no matter what. The snow day bar is one that was definitely very different to clear. Even in college, when I was at Notre Dame, we had the first snow day in the school's history since like the 70s. They never canceled
since
school
my brother was there
in South Bend, all that lake effect snow, and we had one. That was one of the premier drinking days of my entire college career, where everyone's like, all right, school might be closed, the liquor stores are still open, and so we are going to warm ourselves the only way college students know how.
Yeah, we had that at BC too one time, where it was the first. There was some year where we got hit with like some historic snow, and it was the first snow day for years and years. And yeah, it was the same thing. Everybody just got really drunk. I'm sure what parents are paying for their kids to do at college, you know.
It was the only, and that time you mentioned, Mike, that was when my brother Bob, your Uncle Bob, was at Notre Dame, and I remember him talking about the only treks in the snow were from the dorms to the liquor store and back, and that was it. That was the only treks in the snow. Same with you guys. Everybody just got a bunch of liquor and drank. just amazing.
No, Senior. Once we got liquored up enough, we went like sledding. You know, we did something dangerous like that. You know. Yeah.
I had to get drunk enough to act like kids again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was always afraid of getting hurt because it was either during football season or wrestling season. So I was always afraid to do any extracurricular activities.
All right. Some of us can't say the
same.
The
only person that ever really I know got injured sledding was my mom, who absolutely bust her ass going down a hill. Is a story for another day of my mom going full airborne and separating from the sled, hitting her back, and the rest of our family cackling, laughing while all the air left her body and she struggled to get back on her own 2 feet. It is one of the core memories of my childhood and snow activities. So it's we love you, Mom. We're glad you're okay and you survived that. But Jesus H. Christ, was that funny as hell. It's a sound and a sight that it was like a Fast and the Furious movie, the amount of separation that she got airtime from the board before she just whopped right off that thing.
It was just the whoosh of the sled on the snow that you're used to, the sound, the whoosh. And then she hit a ramp and it was complete silence. It was shh. And then just boom. She just hit and the air just shot out of her body. And we were dying laughing. I mean, and she just looked and said, "Don't laugh. Don't laugh at me." She had no air in her body. It was one of the funniest things ever.
Where were you guys sledding? This doesn't sound safe.
Farmington High School in central Connecticut had the biggest hill around us, so everyone would flock there on snow days, and we would all, at some point build ramps near the bottom so we'd try and hit some air off of it, and Mom didn't see the ramp coming, and the rest, as they say, is history. So happy snow days, President's Days to all who observed that yesterday here. Happy Franchise Tag Day to NFL fans who observed that today. That period getting started at 4 o'clock Eastern today, opens today and will run until 4 o'clock Eastern on March 4th, where teams have the opportunity to put any of the variety of franchise tags on their potential players. And as ESPN NFL insider Adam Schefter points out, we don't expect a ton of action on this. As you go through, most teams, obviously, with guys of this caliber, want to get them signed to long-term deals, want to try and find a way to do that, but there are going to be exceptions. Kansas City Chiefs guard Trey Smith is someone that Adam Schefter highlighted could be a potential tag candidate for that team. The Vikings could tag either cornerback Byron Murphy or, as we know, Sam Darnold, kind of that decision hanging out in the ether. And then we get the real interesting one here, Dad, and one that now seems like a mission, truly a placeholder for the Cincinnati Bengals. T. Higgins, widely expected to get the non-exclusive franchise tag again as a wide receiver for this team, but all indications coming out of the Bengals camp are they want to get this deal done. When you put someone on the tag, you've got until July to work out a long-term deal with that player, so it buys you a little time so a guy like T. Higgins doesn't get to true free agency. Now, people that remember the non-exclusive tag with Lamar Jackson last time around understand that, yes, this does technically allow another team to come in and potentially offer him a contract that the Bengals would then have the opportunity to match. But if that team does offer a contract and the player takes it, they would then owe the Bengals 2 first-round picks. So there is a steep price attached to all that. But, Dad, surprised at all that the Bengals are going to try and go down this road where they have T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, who's coming up on a new contract, Trey Hendrickson, who wants more money after another 17.5 sack season. Do you think that they wind up bringing all those guys back?
I don't think they can sign them all this offseason. And again, technically, as you said, it goes till March 4th where they can tag somebody. Then you have till July 15th to do a deal. If it's after July 15th, you have to play, if you're going to play on that tag number like T. Higgins did last year. He played on the tag number of $21.8 million, and if he were to play on the tag number this year, it would be $26.1 million if he were to not sign a long-term deal and play on the tag. So you have Trey Hendrickson's in the last year of his deal and next year at 15.8 and 18.6 cap hit. Jamar Chase is actually on a club option, which nobody thinks that he's going to be playing on the club option of $21.8 million. No. So, and Joe Burrow makes it sound so simple. Joe Burrow, in trying to sign all the players, say, this is Joe Burrow. You could convert some of the money to a signing bonus, which will lower the cap hit. You can push some of the money to the back end of the contract. That lowers the cap hit. And when you guys get to the end of the contract, you can restructure it and convert it to a signing bonus, or you can just take less money. Okay, let's throw the last line out of you can just take less money. Who is going to take less money? Trey Hendrickson, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. They're not going to take less money.
He was talking about himself, though. Joe Burrow, he went on Pardon My Take, and he talked about a lot of what you can do, especially for him, because he mentioned and was very vocal at the end of the season about, hey, I want T. Higgins back in the fold here. He's in need for me. And so he pointed out exactly what we've seen, and we're getting ready to see again, by the way, this offseason with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who signed that big long-term deal in Kansas City. And so what do when they need to free up some cash? They convert it into a signing bonus. They hand those guys a big check, and they put this off till tomorrow, this monster cap hit that's coming for these guys in order to try and go out here and win here and now.
Yeah, you're just pushing it off to another day. You're not solving the issue long term. You're just kicking the can down the road to have an even bigger cap hit the next year. And I love the last line. Okay, if it's him taking less money, so you're going to take a pay cut? I mean, I don't see that happening. So, I mean, the Bengals will just continue to get themselves into longer-term trouble by pushing the can down the road. I have a hard time. And, oh, by the way, You had all your stars this year, those guys we're talking about, and you didn't make the playoffs. So you're not even addressing your issues. So you're spending all your money. I think they have like $42 million in cap space. You're going to spend your money to sign these guys, and you're not going to take care of your defensive deficiencies. Maybe in the draft you will, but maybe not to the standard you would like to actually improve your team. You're talking about signing these players to keep your team as is, which I get because they're great players and you'd love to hang on to them, but it's not solving any issues going forward.
Yeah, I understand maybe some people think just by bringing Al Golden in, you will now solve some of those problems. But Lou Anarumo was pretty good at his job and just didn't seem to have the horses to run. And to your point, Dad, they have tried to draft talent defensively, and it has not worked out very well for this team. And so I'm with you. To me, that's really more of the issue on this. Now, what I will say, I saw Anthony Reinhard over at doing Football Analytics did a chart for Over the Cap, breaking down the amount of salary cap money already earmarked, prorated bonuses, guaranteed salary, dead money in the future for each team, broken down between quarterback and non-quarterback. And the Bengals, going forward, 2025 and beyond, have the least amount of money committed to non-quarterbacks of anyone in the NFL. So that roster has room to be able to afford a lot of these guys. Like the Bengals could absolutely pay all of these guys and bring them back, especially a guy like Trey Hendrickson, who's north of 30. It's not going to be a massive multi-year deal. He's got 1 year left. It would probably be a couple of year extension on that contract with a bump in pay there. Jamar Chase would be the big one. T. Higgins, I'm not sure what that extension would look like. But quite honestly, Dad, T. Higgins is the one I looked at before the offseason and said, hey, if it's between him and going out and trying to have, we'll talk about the notion of an Eagles offseason and what that means, but signing an impact starter on both sides of the ball, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, would going and trying to bring in a guy like Josh Sweat coming off the run that he had in the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles to pair him opposite Trey Hendrickson, would earmarking some of that money for a spend like that on defense where you've shown, hey, we're not very good at drafting the guys that are going to go out and help here, but if we plant our flag around Trey Hendrickson, who's been a walking 17.5 sack season, and then add more guys with that money there, that to me is the conversation to have around these guys. Yes, you can, I think, afford to bring all of them back here, but to your point, what does that net you if you're not going out there and bringing in help elsewhere, especially on defense?
Yeah, I mean, they're in a win-now mode with the talent they have on offense, and you don't want to just rely on rookie draft picks on your defensive side of the ball. You'd like some veteran free agents to come in and help right away. And by the way, the positions they're paying are some of the highest paid positions on the field at this point, right? The wide receiver position in the last couple of years has jumped up exponentially to $35 million a year for Justin Jefferson. Jamar Chase is probably going to get closer to $40 million a year. You're right. I don't know what T. Higgins is going to get. He's not going to get that, but he's going to get a hell of a nice payday. And edge rushers, sackers, are making over $30 million a year. So they're not only having to sign those guys, but it's some of the highest paid positions out there. And as we said, is still not solving the defensive issues.
No, to your point, you look, the franchise tag is the average of the top 5 salaries at your position. And keep in mind, for linebacker, that includes stand-up edge guys, so that kind of inflates that number a little bit. But to your point, Dad, if you look at the franchise tag numbers for this year, wide receiver is the third highest tag number at $25.69 million. That's just behind linebacker and quarterback. So ostensibly edge rusher and quarterback when you factor in those two positions. And so, yes, the Bengals can. I think you're right. I don't know if should is the right answer, because with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, you're still going to be really good. Like, you've been really good. Yeah. Yes, T. Higgins, when healthy and on the field, takes your offense to a different level. No questions asked about that. But at some point, like we have seen in Kansas City, like we have seen in Buffalo, your high-priced quarterback, who's one of the best at what he does, is expected to offset when you need to lose in some of those other areas in order to add talent. This would be different if the Bengals were capable of drafting and developing well, but so far, that's been a swing and a miss on defense.
Yeah, it has. So it'll be interesting if they do tag T. Higgins, the amount of money and what T. Higgins does. Again, I don't think he's going to not play, and he would play for over $26 million. And I don't know if another team is going to give up 2 first-round picks signing him to a long-term deal.
I'll say this, Dad. It seems like the writing's on the wall for this. The Bengals seem like they want to get this deal done. It's not done to try and strap him in here. And I don't think another team's going to come in and pry him out for 2-1s as much as New England or Washington or any of these teams might want him. No receiver's worth that. And so I think what we're going to get is T. Higgins is going to be a Cincinnati Bengal, and he's probably going to be one for the foreseeable future. And then what they decide to do defensively is going to become the plan. Are they capable of having an Eagles offseason? And what does that even mean? We'll try and sort through the wreckage next here on Gojo and Golic. All right, welcome back to Gojo and Golic. We will keep everyone updated on the franchise tag situation going on in the NFL right now. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we will see if David Dennis Jr. can help us fix the NBA All-Star game. Dad, we've got mom tweets about the franchise tag. T. Higgins, who's widely expected to be franchise tagged. Mom hit the timeline and tweeted, "Selfish bastards." And then a couple of tweets later in the replies claim that it's not about the Cincinnati Bengals. So maybe just poor timing for something else that's happened. As someone that had to get on the phone with a credit bureau to try and undo a freeze and realize how difficult it is to get a hold of these people, she could have been on the phone with any number of folks trying to get to a human being on a phone line and just getting the automated answers of this. It's maddening. So T. Higgins' mom, if you're dealing with something like that, I appreciate what you're going through, and I know you're not upset with the Bengals who are about to make your son a very rich man.
Yeah, the timing is a bit odd there, that there should be some explanation if it's not about being franchise tagged, what the actual situation is about, because we are all going to assume, even though you shouldn't assume for general reasons, it certainly seems like it was about the Bengals.
Yeah, no. T. Higgins' mom is also one that is a wanter of the smoke online. I was going back in the timeline, and she had tweeted, "No effing way," at some point. Someone had said something snide about her son, saying, "Incomplete, T can't catch a ball to save his life," to which she responded, "And your fat ass can't catch your breath." So if you want the smoke with mom online, go ahead and tread lightly. Shout out to T. Higgins' mom for riding for her baby boy on the internet here. But the T. Higgins offseason saga with the Cincinnati Bengals is going to be one of the interesting sagas. We mentioned this is a team that last year, despite all the weapons, did not go out here and do what most people thought they would do with Joe Burrow coming back healthy, which is make a playoff run. They were on the outside looking in. The defense couldn't get right. And so they have a lot to work on this offseason, as does a team like the Dallas Cowboys. And that is where we enter our friend Emmanuel Acho over on the facility on Fox Sports 1, who yesterday tried this one out here. It was pretty interesting unit of measurement for an offseason. He claims that the Dallas Cowboys are a mere one Eagles offseason away from being Super Bowl champions. Take a listen.
Okay. The Cowboys are one Eagles offseason away from a Super Bowl. They are one Eagles offseason away.
That sounds easy.
They're running. No, it's not easy.
Sounds simple.
It's not simple.
No, it sounds simple, dog.
It's not, because you know how.
So let's take how he's done. It don't matter.
It's not easy at all. Not. But that is what they are. They're running back away. Eagles offseason. Saquon Barkley. They're linebacker away. Eagles offseason. Zach Bond. They're one offensive lineman away. Eagles offseason, Mekhi Becton. There's a number 2 wide receiver away. No Eagles offseason there. Obviously, they got Jahan Dotson, who contributed in the Super Bowl, but didn't do a ton during the course of the season. The Eagles are they're a defensive tackle away. Jordan Davis or Jalen Carter. The Eagles are one. The Cowboys are one Eagles offseason away from a Super Bowl.
So,
wow.
As he said many times, it's not easy. But uttering all of those as if each line item on that list were somehow similar or just really resembling their title, like Saquon Barkley saying that's one running back away as opposed to the guy who finished third in MVP voting away, or Zach Bond, the guy who was a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year away, is a little bit different, Dad, than just plugging it with a plug-and-play linebacker that we'd usually get at this spot. So are the Dallas Cowboys and Eagles offseason away from being Super Bowl champions, Dad?
Hell no. I mean, you got to throw the draft in there, too, where Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. I mean, tell me the last time the Cowboys had a good offseason where Jerry Jones actually built towards a championship. He says they're building every year towards a championship, but then you scratch your head at the lack of moves that are made. So their ability to have a Philadelphia offseason is almost 0%. So, I mean, I get it technically if they have a Philadelphia offseason, they're closer, but my God, I mean, it's one of the best off seasons that a team has ever had. Hitting on a running back, hitting on a linebacker in free agency, hitting on 2 DBs in the draft. I mean, my God. I mean, you can't just flippantly say that because it does. It's a greater chance of getting that than actually getting that. And again, Dallas has not shown the ability to have a great offseason. So I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah, I would say the notion of being an Eagles offense, yeah, there's probably a bunch of teams in the NFL we can run down and say are an Eagles offseason away. Because as we've highlighted in the lead up to the Super Bowl, Howie Roseman and the Eagles organization had one of the best offseasons in the history of the sport. To your point, Dad, the Dallas Cowboys would just like to have a good offseason where they paid players on time, where they maybe did something in free agency other than sit on their hands for once. All of those things would probably make Cowboys fans feel like they had the Eagles offseason when really they just had an offseason that resembled literally everyone else in the NFL who feels like they have an opportunity to win a title here. Again, going and signing an impact starter, an all-pro level starter on both sides of the football, bringing in 2 new coordinators that both played a massive role in this, having one of the premier offensive line coaches in the sport that helps you break in a new starter and a reclamation project in Mekhi Becton, having 2 impact rookies show up and play meaningful snaps as starters on the defensive side of the football, and have one of your defensive tackles develop into what many people, including the original Aaron Donald, are calling the next Aaron Donald, are all things there. Now, Dad, that being said, with the Cowboys, we know they've got a ton of talent. Like, they bring back one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. They should re-sign to a massive extension one of the 2 or 3 most impactful defensive players in the sport. Trevon Diggs in the secondary is a guy that can have that kind of impact when he's healthy and on the field, on and on down the list. So, yes, the Cowboys aren't far off, Dad, in terms of what they need around the core of that roster, but they're also in certain areas, I think especially offensive and defensive line, a long way away from doing anything resembling what Philadelphia, because that's really what the Philadelphia formula is about, is having that sturdy foundation on both lines of scrimmage and the way that they're able to recruit and develop to that identity. And that's one thing we talked about for Dallas. That would be a wholesale flip. Philly's been doing O&D line pretty well for a while now. Dallas has really struggled in recent years with the whole run and stop the run business, Dad. So unless you're able to shock drop on that side, both sides of the ball on that position group in particular, you're going to have a bad time finding the rest of this stuff.
Yeah, that's a crazy statement. If Dallas can have a Philly offseason. I mean, quite honestly, there are plenty of teams that are closer than the Cowboys that if they have a good offseason where they have one or two pieces, they could be, closer to the Super Bowl. You look at the AFC teams, Buffalo and Baltimore to go along with Kansas City and Washington to make some moves, Detroit to make some moves, get another pass rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson that are closer than the Cowboys are. Because, I mean, the offseason that Philly had is way more rare than exception to the rule. And you're right. They have steadfastly built by the lines of scrimmage. The O-line has been one of the best in the league for a few years now. And the D-line just keeps getting better and better as they bring in more Georgia players. So that's their foundation. And when your foundation is built on the bigs, and you move further away from the bigs, you are in great shape. And they're in great shape for years to come. Now let's see if they can keep some of the people that they brought in.
Jesse, how big of a jump would this be for the Dallas Cowboys if they were to make this kind of run and pull off what Acho's talking about here?
Well, let's see. There's Super Bowl odds for 2025. Can you just take a guess here? It's plus 6,500. So, I don't know. Not great odds. Not really easy.
So they're tied for
17th. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
With Seattle, Pittsburgh, Miami, and Atlanta. So, not good.
No, and I'd have to go back and look and see what the Eagles Super Bowl odds were last year. Well, remember this year, the Cowboys didn't even make this year the Cowboys didn't even make the playoffs this last season. The Eagles lost in the wild card round a year ago. So, Dad, that's what I went back and looked at was the teams that lost in the wild card round. That might be a quote. Again, I love the Eagles offseason, as if I said this yesterday on Twitter, as if this was the Princess Diaries, where all you have to do is take off Anne Hathaway's glasses and straighten her hair, and now all of a sudden you realize what's been there underneath all along here. It's
a princess.
Just that simple.
Yeah.
Presenting the Eagles. So, of the teams that lost in wild card weekend, Dad, with Green Bay, Minnesota, Tampa Bay in the NFC, and then the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Steelers in the AFC. Which of those teams do you think is one Eagles offseason away from being Super Bowl contenders?
Wait, who were they again?
We're talking about in the NFC, it's the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who all lost on Wild Card Weekend. And in the AFC, it's the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Steelers who all lost on Wild Card Weekend.
I look at the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh because he's built championship teams before, coached championship team or close to championship to Super Bowl teams, to where they go on the offensive side of the ball. Because I like their defense certainly improved, but the offensive side of the ball, because they lost all the power last year, you still have a hell of an armed quarterback in Herbert. So I look at them as a team that can make a jump for sure. Because I buy into Harbaugh. I mean, I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs, and they made the playoffs after losing all the firepower on offense. So I look at the Chargers as a team that could be an offseason away from making a move, and that would be a hell of a move, because that would be jumping Baltimore, who's got the Ronnie Stanley issue at left tackle, the Buffalo issue, and Kansas City, which just, even though it was a bad game and they played a bad game and just got soundly beaten in the Super Bowl, they're still at the Super Bowl more often than not.
Yeah, I think the Chargers are an interesting one because part of the Eagles offseason equation, and I I don't think any of the teams that we're looking at here are going to be able to satisfy every part of what the Eagles did. The wholesale changes they endured in one offseason are usually what most teams have spread out over multiple offseasons. But the Chargers, Dad, do need an impact starter on both sides of the ball, at wide receiver on offense and at pass rusher if they're going to lose Khalil Mack, which they likely are on defense. And so if they're able to do that and you hit in those two areas in particular, you are talking about a team that stands to improve massively, especially in that division.
I think a team to keep an eye on, a team that's window is open and was shut a little sooner than people anticipated this year, was Detroit. Because now you have to replace both coordinators before you even get to the players on the field. And obviously you've done that, but then you go to the players on the field. You need another pass rusher outside Aiden Hutchinson. You need more help on that defense as well. O-line that's maybe aging just a little bit. That's a team that I'm interested, while their window is open, because I do think it is still open. How do they, because it took Philly a couple of times, because they went through both coordinators 3 years in a row, and they hit on the third time, right? Not the second time, but the third time. So let's see how Detroit handles not having Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn around.
So they are the one I thought of because of the coordinator changes there. But theirs, to your point, was guys going off for opportunity, like happened with Philadelphia a couple of years ago when things went really badly in the 2023 season. Philadelphia went out and made those changes on their own this last offseason. That's why I actually, especially of the teams that lost on Wild Card Weekend, Green Bay is the one that's interesting, right? They need a high-end wide receiver and a go-to pass rusher that they need to add on both sides of the ball. An impact starter, a playmaker, a party starter on each side of the ball for them. They already did their version of the Saquon Barkley, which Josh Jacobs nowhere near that, but was a productive player, at least volume stat-wise there. I know some of the underlying stuff with him wasn't as promising, but you went and got the new coordinator in Jeff Hafley last offseason that gave you that sort of impact. By and large, that seemed to check the box for a lot of people, especially late in last year. You've gotten the secondary there, a couple of young guys that you brought over last year, and Evan Williams and Javon Bullard that played minutes for you. Xavier McKinney was a free agent acquisition that you brought over that paid off pretty well, was a productive player. So if you lump the Green Bay Packers offseason from last year in with whatever they do this year, if they're able to add those couple of starters, they might be able to combine two off seasons and create what that's the message, is what Philadelphia did in one off season is usually a 2 or 3 year stretch for most teams.
And there's a lot of players available, especially at the wide receiver position now, where you're talking age and injury to some, but you can get some wide receivers that can contribute right away. And then the biggest offseason acquisition, Myles Garrett, right? If he truly gets traded, whatever team he lands on, that's the start of a Howie Roseman offseason by a team getting Myles Garrett, though you'll have to give up a decent amount to get.
Yes, the easiest way to begin your Eagles offseason is to, again, just get a defensive end, a.k.a. pry one of the best pass rushers in the National Football League out of Cleveland for a hefty king's ransom. Coming up next, David Dennis Jr. is going to help us fix the NBA All-Star Game here on Gojo and Golic. Nothing more popular on Sports Talk in the last couple of days than fixing the NBA All-Star Game. What do we have to do to restore order to this once glorious franchise? Is this just all us? Is the media doing all of this? Do we really need to spend this much time and bandwidth fixing this? David Dennis Jr., kind enough to join us here, was out at NBA All-Star Weekend. You can catch him, senior writer, over at Anscape. You can also check him out with Mina Kimes doing the Lord's Worth. Love is Kimes breaking down Love is Blind Season 8 now, wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube here. As my dad bows his head. Dad, like, you don't watch reality TV with the rest of us here. David, good morning, man. How you doing?
Good morning. You need to understand something. That Mina Kimes, as we all know, is, a tenacious NFL tape watcher, breaks down tape. The way that she breaks down the Love is Blind Season 8, that we do the same thing. We are crunching tape. This is like the yeoman's work that it takes to understand what's going on a given episode of Love is Blind is pretty much the same as breaking down NFL game footage, in my personal opinion.
Can I ask one simple question? Much like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, Love is Blind, what is this now, season 89 or whatever? Have any
8
couples lasted?
Oh yeah, we have some couples. We have there's a couple from the first season that's still together, even though I think they were crisis actors to make sure that to make us believe that the experiment was good. I think they came in as a couple. That is my conspiracy theory. But there are some couples that have made it. They've got a couple kids. If you need to believe in love to believe in Love is Blind, and I think we all believe in love, and I think it's possible.
Oh, God.
Yeah, Dad, who hurt you? Who blackened your heart so much that you would look away from love when it's staring you right in the face?
I just find it hard to believe, like in The Bachelor, Bachelorette, or Love is Blind, that you find love in a matter of days or weeks, that you find your person forever. It just seems odd. But then again, I'm from a different generation.
You can't tell me. Go. You have a wonderful love story, and I imagine that it may have been love at first sight when you saw your person. I think it's the same thing. There just weren't any cameras there.
Yes. Exactly. There weren't cameras around to capture this moment that, again, Dad, is based on the experiment that's about finding depth. You're falling in love with someone's soul before you ever actually get to see and meet the person here. It's a beautiful concept, and one that, again, you can hear all of this and more. David Dennis Jr., Mina Kimes, Love is Kimes, a phenomenal, granular breakdown of the reality dating show that is at the top of the game right now. But speaking of the top of the game, let's talk about NBA All-Star Weekend here before we get to the second half of the NBA season as well. I mentioned yesterday, David, I think fixing the NBA All-Star Game is just something we do. While I know Adam Silver and company clearly care enough to try, I do wonder how far this goes in an era where you get to see so many of your favorite players on national TV games and in all these different environments that used to get supplemented by the All-Star Game. Do you think this is much ado about nothing?
A little bit. I mean, I don't know where we come from, this world where the NBA All-Star Game was this like competitive, thing every year. Like, this is a thing. Once in a few years, you'll catch lightning in a bottle and you'll just have these monumental All-Star games, right? And it's just kind of just chance about what happens on the court. Like the 2001 All-Star game, Allen Iverson, Stephon Marbury went crazy. They came down for 20. 2003, Jordan's last All-Star game where he hit this game winner. When they first had the Kobe rule, that was a competitive All-Star game. It just sort of happens through the course of the game. And there's this idea, like, you go to like the 1995 All-Star game. It's not like these guys are playing competitive basketball and people are fouling out. It's always been an exhibition, and I just think we just put a lot of pressure on it to be better than what it is. When really what it's about is fun, some dunks, like a good weekend of partying. Really, I think the thing that you can really tinker with and fix is the dunk competition. That is, I think, the thing that really kind of drags down the whole weekend, because that's the thing that you're supposed to feel like is the most fun exhibition thing. For the most part, except for one dude who cares about it for the last 3 years, it's not been that great. And I think that's kind of dragging the weekend down. And that's the thing you can tinker with more than just overthinking having guys go out and play a basketball game.
I think the main part of this is you can't force players to A, be competitive, and B, be a part of a dunk contest or a three-point contest. You can't force them. The NBA All-Star Game, like the Pro Bowl, used to be more competitive, and you can't make. We keep saying maybe the younger generation will take it more serious. You can't rely on that. So you either leave it as is, or you tinker with it. The NFL tinkered with it and now do, different skills challenges. And the NBA tried to tinker with it with the 4 teams in the playoffs, which had its pros and its cons. It seems like, I don't know, is there one more tinkering that you can do that we'll get from the Unrivaled in the one-on-one tournament? And if you can do a one-on-one tournament, can you get stars to play in it?
So that's the thing. I think like the NBA players, they do this every year. They kind of gaslight us a little bit. But after the dunk contest, after the All-Star, they say, hey, we're going to take this thing really seriously. I'm going to do the dunk contest this year. I'm going to really care about one-on-one. But when the rubber hits the road and you have to sign up, like we saw like a small glimpse. Kyrie was one-on-one with Victor Wembanyama, and like Victor Wembanyama like almost had both of his Achilles torn because he was trying to guard this dude. And it's like, you don't want to be on House of Highlights on ESPN getting your ankles broke one-on-one by Kyrie Irving, just like you don't want to go out there and have Matt McClung beat you in a dunk contest. Like there's just so much. And we could talk about the athletes. We got to hold some of this blame too. Like we, as the media, got to hold some of this because we're going to be the ones on Monday after, who knows, like a 6-man beats Anthony Edwards in a one-on-one game. We're going to say, does Anthony Edwards really have that dog in him? Is he a clutch performer? Like we have contributed to this in a way that kind of makes these athletes not want to take these things so seriously. So I'm not sure if the one-on-one is going to happen. What I think will probably happen, they'll probably stick with the tournament one more year and take away some of those mid-game distractions and see what happens if you don't have those breaks in between. And then if that doesn't work, we'll go back to a regular format.
All right, so we've got more tinkering to come with the NBA All-Star Game. You mentioned the media element. An interesting crossover of the media and players was Draymond Green's involvement in All-Star Weekend, and he seemed to be one of the chief haters when it came to everything going on in All-Star Weekend. So, David, I ask you, what was the wildest thing Draymond Green said? Was it guaranteeing the championship for Golden State this year now with Jimmy Butler, or apparently claiming that the Warriors have offered him the head coaching job there when he's done playing?
I think it's all of the above, including like saying that the entire game of basketball sucks right now. I think that was part of the stuff that was interesting. I mean, I get it. He's trying to be provocative. I think he's trying to light a fire under the Warriors. I don't have a problem with him saying we're going to win because like that sort of thing. You tell Jimmy Butler, he's like bet, and we're going to go out there and try to win a championship. The idea that Draymond Green has already been promised a coaching job for the Warriors after Steve Kerr is absolutely hilarious. I, for one, as we're talking about reality shows, give me a camera, put it in the locker room, give me Draymond coaching the Warriors, and I don't care what the win-loss record is. I just want to see it.
I don't even know where he came up with that statement. I mean, that is so out of left field that to me, that's way more shocking than saying Golden State can win the championship because you have Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry. Who the hell knows? So let's dive into the second half. And the main question for me, my Cleveland Cavaliers, best in the Eastern Conference. Can they actually hang on and represent?
Okay, I think Cleveland has a shot here. I've been like really high on Cleveland, and I've been higher on Cleveland than a lot of people, and lower on Boston than a lot of people for a lot of reasons we could definitely get into. But I think the Hunter trade, adding the Hunter to this team, he adds defense, he adds versatility. Like when they played Boston, one of the problems that they had was Brown and Tatum were targeting Garland and Mitchell on the offensive end because those guys are, struggle defensively. You add Hunter there, he's going to cause some problems. He's going to move Dean Wade to a more sort of natural position. So you have a little bit more defensive versatility there. And then it really comes down to Donovan Mitchell. If he can be the best player on the court for like 2 or 3 of those games, right? Like if he can go out there, we saw, game 2 in Boston, he was that guy. If Donovan Mitchell can show up for a big game like that and leave where Boston does not have an answer for him, I think Cleveland has a shot. Like I believe in Cleveland a lot more than a lot of other folks do. I do think they can take it to 7, especially if they're going to have home court advantage.
All right, there you go, Dad. Believeland. It's official here. You have been given all the ammo you need to go ahead and believe that the Cavaliers run can be here. On the other side, I'll take the low-hanging fruit on this, David. We're walking into the second half of the season. The Lakers will be the first team we see back Wednesday night playing that makeup game that got moved when the wildfires were going on out here in Los Angeles. The Lakers finish over or under their current position of 5th in the Western Conference when it's all said and done this season?
I think they're like push. I think they're right there in 5. I don't think. I mean, I think that they can maybe creep up in Houston because Houston's been struggling as of late. But I think their position. I don't think they're better than OKC, Denver, or Memphis, and a lot of that has to do with that size. Like we could talk about Luka and LeBron and what they can do, but both of those guys really flourish when they have bigs with them. We've always seen that they have needed that big guy that they can, throw lobs to and who can play defense. They're not like the Warriors in a way that the Warriors are constituted that they can go small and still maintain defensively. The Lakers, Luka Doncic does not run fast like that. They're not going to be a fast team as Luka Doncic is on the court. They're not a fast-paced squad. So now you're relying on LeBron and Luka to just be offensive maestros to overcome all of that. When the fact of the matter is, the top of that West, you got Chet Holmgren, you got Jaren Jackson Jr., you got Jokic, you even got Şengün. You got bigs out there that you're going to have to compete against. And I just don't think that the Lakers have enough to offset the fact that they're going to be demolished in the paint whenever they play those teams.
So the trade that happened that sent AD to Dallas, that put kind of Dallas on the clock as far as a window of opportunity open. And now AD is hurt. But how long do you think that window is open, if it's open at all, quite honestly?
So I never saw the window was being quite open. Like the window's shut when they move Luka. But if you are the Mavericks, you're basically playing for the next like 2 or 3 years, basically as long as Anthony Davis, that you think that this dude can be the best player in the league and be healthy, which for the last 2 years, we talk about Anthony Davis being hurt. For the last 2 years before this injury, he played about 94% of the games. He's one of the more healthy players in the league, even though like he'll go out in the fourth quarter and you think he's out for the season, he comes back 2 minutes later. So we have this idea of him being perennially injured. So I think that the Mavericks saw that and they said, hey, if this dude can be the best player, we can make it for another 2 years. I never quite saw that because I just think that it's just a little clunky, that offense with all those bigs and AD. There's no floor spacing. You have Kyrie, who is a shoot first point guard, and you're asking him to run an offense. You have an aging Clay. The fit just never quite made sense to me. Yes, they're going to be tough defensively. I just don't know how they're going to score enough points, even with Kyrie on there, even with everybody healthy.
So while they might have to figure out the answers to those questions, the team right now that most people have penciled in with all the answers is Oklahoma City. How far ahead of the pack are we? Are we at like OKC versus the field at this point this season, or is there more of a crack in there that we can expose as we get to the playoffs with this team?
To me, it's OKC in the field. To me, it's hard for me at this point in the season to think about anybody else winning a championship right now than OKC. Now, things could change, but I think Denver, with the way Jokic and Murray playing, they can kind of hop above a couple other teams. But like OKC, SGA is getting a lot of attention, obviously, because he's going to be MVP, 32-6-5, dropping 50-point games. I think 3 in the last like 2 weeks or something like that. That's getting a lot of attention. But really, what's going to win them this championship, I think, is their defense. Lou Dort is probably the best perimeter defender in the league. They have a defensive rating that's number 1 that is like miles above everybody else. And they've been doing this without Chet Holmgren, who is probably going to be the best defensive player on their team going forward. And he's going to add some offense to this squad. They're 44-10. Like they're one of the most disrespected 44-10 teams I've ever seen. And I think people say, oh, because they're so young. But it's not like they're going to be playing a ton of veterans going forward. I mean, Boston is a veteran-style team, but Cleveland's still young. Memphis is still young. So they're playing. I think they just have that poise right now. And for most of the time, they're going to have the best player on the court and the best defense. Generally, that is a formula for winning a championship. So right now, unless something drastic changes, it's OKC versus everybody else.
And it seems like, to your point, they are well equipped to go up against everyone else and feel pretty damn good about all of it. If you like that breakdown for basketball, obviously you can check him out wherever you see him on ESPN. Read him in Anscape. He's on Around the Horn. And, of course, if you want that applied to reality dating, he's got you on the Love is Kimes front as well. David Dennis Jr., kind enough to give us some time this morning. David, we appreciate it, man. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Thanks for having me. Check out Love is Kind this week. We've got 2 episodes coming this week. Golic, I know you're locked in. You got a lot of episodes to catch up on, so you can get on the pod. It's audio version now too, so you can listen to it while you're working out, doing all that stuff. Gather the family around and watch Love is Blind, then listen to Love is Kind.
Wow. I can't think of a more wholesome viewership experience and then supplemental content experience than he laid out right there. Go and get it done, Dad. Hop on the train.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. The Four Nations final is set on Thursday in Boston. It is the rematch everybody was praying for, USA and Canada. It is going down. So the Americans' 3-1 win over Canada on Saturday night was the talk of the sports world. This game had everything. 3 fights in the opening 9 seconds of the game and some damn good hockey. The victory clinched a spot in the Four Nations title game for the U.S. before Canada set up the sequel with its regulation win Monday over Finland. USA slight favorite at -112 on the money line, but it's essentially another pick'em. So USA lost 2-1 to Sweden last night in a game that was basically meaningless. Next up, what's not meaningless? We will be joined by Jason Fitz.
Hour number 2 here on Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. Is college football set up for success with only 2 sets of hands on the wheel governing what happens going forward? We will ask that question as the SEC and Big Ten meet this week in New Orleans to decide the future of the sport. But in the meantime, here on Gojo and Golic, we are joined, as we are often on Tuesdays, by our buddy Jason Fitz. You can check him out over at Yahoo Sports, host of Inside Coverage. You can check him out the College Football Power Hour as well. I think did a little Fox Sports Radio over this morning with 2 pros and a cup of Joe. So, Fitzy, you're all lubed up and ready to go. The takes are already flowing right now. How you feeling?
Oh, man, I feel good now that I'm with you guys. I don't know, though. Like, we saw each other in New Orleans, but every time I came back to the set after that, I didn't see you guys there. I feel like, did you guys survive New Orleans okay? Like, are we feeling froggy after we had all that time on bourbon?
Man, I went down, Jason. I got sick the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was of the, I think the 29 or 30 Super Bowls I've been to, the second worst that I've been at, as far as me personally getting sick. There was a Super Bowl in Miami where I had to sleep on the floor the entire week because I had a bad back. I slept on the floor with my legs up on the bed. That was a horrid week. And this one, the last 3 days, I was basically clinging to my bed in the hotel. So not the I didn't get the amount of beignets or king cakes that I would have liked. That's for sure.
I will say you didn't know this. We hadn't talked about it, but I felt tired while I was there, and I was like, man, it's weird. I feel tired. By the time I flew back Friday night, I was sick. I ended up the next day tested positive for the flu, and then I had pneumonia. So like for a full week, like I'm still coughing up a lung. Like for a full something in New Orleans got all of us sick, and it wasn't just the game.
It was some sort of, it's a super spreader. We're all in a gigantic conference center with no real airflow and no sunlight in there. One of our producers got the flu, the neurovirus, and COVID all in the same cocktail. So the Super Bowl existed to try and kill us this season here. The NFL offseason, though, is our salve and is our savior. We all get to take a little bit of time here. Jason, we're in tag season right now. We're getting ready. The franchise tag window opens today till March 4th. T. Higgins, widely expected to be tagged and extended by the Cincinnati Bengals, and we were talking about that this morning. Where are you at on that as the right decision, Jason, knowing the season that the Bengals just went through with Joe Burrow and the same crew on offense, Trey Hendrickson on defense, is running all these guys back at an even bigger dollar amount the right decision for them?
So the problem here is that people keep applying the Eagles' logic of saying, well, look, the Eagles managed to sign everybody. They managed to keep paying everybody, and they build their roster. Okay, a couple of things that the Bengals are missing here. Number one is that part of Howie Roseman does this is part of an important part of his formula is signing early. All right, so you've already lost that window. You didn't sign any of your guys early. You're not getting ahead of market value on T. Higgins or Jamar or Trey Hendrickson. Instead, you're doing the Cowboys approach. We've seen how that works. Wait till the last minute to then sign everybody, which is a salary cap crusher. The other part of it is if you're going to apply the Eagles logic of paying everybody, then you also need to have Eagles-like drafts. And I don't think that we've seen that from the Bengals when it comes to particularly the defensive side of the ball, right? Like we just saw the blueprint. You beat the Kansas City Chiefs by dominating them at the line of scrimmage. Last time I checked, we're coming off an MVP caliber season for Joe Burrow that resulted in 9 wins. Like, the Bengals' issue is they need an entirely new defense. So to me, I understand why you sit here and say, well, T's very good. We want to keep him in the fold, keep your best players. Fine. But that money that they have right now has to be allocated to the defensive side of the ball if the Bengals actually want to have a Super Bowl shot.
What team, and we know Emmanuel Acho said it's the Cowboys, what team is a Eagle offseason away from winning a Super Bowl?
Oh, my God. Acho going with the Cowboys on that. And an Eagles offseason away, by the way, means that you've got to catch lightning in a bottle to get, 4 or 5? Like, I keep screaming this, guys. A Hall of Fame offseason. Oh, my God, I can't believe we just had that offseason is getting 4 or 5 starters that are absolutely going to come in and play at the highest possible level. That's what the Eagles managed to do, particularly between Saquon and then Zach Baum. We all know that. And then also just letting the board come to him. Quinyon Mitchell was widely respected as the number 1 corner. He comes to him. Cooper DeJean falls in the second round. Like they got so many breaks. One offseason. I mean, if we're going to take 4 or 5 new starters, who's the closest? It's still the Lions, right? Like the Lions were decimated by injuries. All they have to do is get healthy, and they're going to be able to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. For the Cowboys to have that sort of an offseason, I think there are certain drafts that are historic. I think what the Eagles just did last year was a historic offseason, and there's no proof of concept that the Cowboys can do that.
No, I completely agree, Jason, what Philadelphia pulled off, and had a lot of people after the Super Bowl going with, well, does this show that maybe you don't need one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL and you can just build up the rest of your roster? And I had to tap people on the shoulder and remind them, it is a lot easier for you to stumble drunk into one of the best quarterbacks in the league than it would be for your front office, you stock NFL fan, to go and pull off what what Philadelphia, there's a Freudian slip, what Philadelphia just did in this last offseason. So people need to slow their roll on that. But it brings us to an interesting debate then for this offseason at the quarterback position, because a lot of people are going to still chase that one as the easiest pathway to your success. And we know fewer good answers there this offseason than in normal offseasons. highlighted by the fact that Sam Darnold is probably going to be the belle of the ball this offseason, unless all of a sudden Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams had this fracture that people are maybe hinting at could be possible. And so, Fitz, I saw this, our friends at Ramona, Kayla, and Will down at 104.5 The Zone in Nashville asked the question relative to them, but I would ask you, for the Raiders, for the Tennessee Titans, would you rather have your incumbent replacement level quarterback, in the case of the Titans, a Will Levis, or would you rather have Sam Darnold for $40 million a year on your team walking into next season?
Sam Darnold. Look, I would take – I know Sam Darnold's not great, and I understand that the version of Sam Darnold that the next team is likely to get is not going to be the same thing as they were able to get out of the Vikings. Let's give the Vikings a lot of credit for their ability to coach up their quarterback, okay? I'll acknowledge all of those things. I still think at this point, if I had the choice between Sam Darnold and either of the quarterbacks in this year's draft that everybody's in love with, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, is clearly Sam Darnold. Give me the best player available in this year's draft and give me that quarterback rather than giving me a stretch of the quarterback that I don't think should be picked in the top 10 at all.
Do you think the Vikings should franchise Sam Darnold? The tag for a quarterback is $41 million. Then you can see how J.J. McCarthy is coming along. Either franchise him or sign him to a short deal.
Yeah, Vikings fans keep killing me every time I say franchise and franchise and franchise. I don't like risk that I don't have to take. So look, yeah, could the Vikings spend the money elsewhere? Would it be good for them? Yeah, I hear all of those things. You got to have a quarterback. And JJ might be the answer. JJ might not be the answer. I know Sam Darnold melted down in 2 games, and everybody wants to think about that. He's still 1-14. That is not easy to do. So 1,000 times out of 1,000, I would turn around. And look, Charles Robinson, our Yahoo Sports insider, made it clear this week on Inside Coverage repeatedly that the people he's talked to around the Giants and the Raiders both have made it clear they are doing their research on the existing class that is coming in for free agency, because they all right now what we're seeing are teams are looking at Shedeur and Cam and saying, man, I don't know. There's a lot better chance that this year's quarterback class ends up being the Zach Wilson type quarterback class than it ends up being what we saw last year. So to me, if I have a choice at $40 million, and look, Sam Darnold, I've seen a lot of projections, I think is going to get a 4-year deal where the first 2 years are guaranteed. It's about $100 million contract. That's what most people expect. So $80 to $100 million in the first 2 years. If I got to pay $80 to $100 million for the first 2 years, it gives me a stop bridge quarterback. If he turns out to be great, fine. If he doesn't, I can address the quarterback next year. That's a better way to do it for everybody. If I'm the Vikings, I don't want to let him walk out the door because, frankly, JJ might be ready. JJ might not be ready. And I'm in a Super Bowl window. If I'm in a Super Bowl window, I am not taking any chances at the quarterback position I don't need to take. And I'm not going to roll the dice that I could just do it with anybody. The Vikings have been through so many injuries and so many bad quarterbacks in the last 2 years. Why take any chances you don't need to take?
God, the Minnesota Vikings, who famously brought in Kirk Cousins to try and get them over the playoff hump, now turning potentially to Sam Darnold and expecting the same, would be interesting to say the least. The deal you described, essentially the Daniel Jones deal, that it would be for Sam Darnold in Minnesota, which I don't think is out of the question, but will be interesting to see. So you mentioned you're not sold on the quarterbacks in this year's draft. You obviously, the college football power hour we talk about at Yahoo all the time. You watch and cover these guys. You and I see a ton of college football here. Cam Ward just came out and said, in response to some of the comments, I think at the Davey O'Brien luncheon for the award for the top college quarterback, if you don't draft me, that's your fault. You've got to remember that you're the same team that's got to play me for the rest of my career. I'll remember that. He's gone down the path that many quarterbacks before have. We've heard that song and dance. But, Jason, you're not sold on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders as what, top 10 picks, first-round picks? How far down does that go for you?
I think in a normal draft, both of them are middle first-round picks that you understand are a bit of a project that you're going to take a little bit of time and you're not going to put them on the field right away. So if you told me that Shedeur or Cam were being drafted somewhere where they wouldn't have to play year one, maybe not even year two, and they'd get the chance to develop under a coach and a quarterback that can help teach them everything they need to know about the position, I'd feel a lot better about that. The problem is these things don't align, right? So if you're the Giants, everybody knows that Daboll's on the hot seat. So now you got to draft a quarterback that's suddenly going to get you to 8, 9, 10 wins. That's a huge leap to take. And most of the teams that are picking at or near the top of the draft are picking there because they have holes all over their roster. Like the Titans are not a quarterback away from suddenly competing. And I know that people will say, well, That's the same thing we said about Washington a year ago. I would challenge some of that. And I would also tell you that most smart people a year ago were begging anybody to try and trade up. I had people tell me that teams were offering as many as 3 first-round picks to move up with Washington to get Jaden Daniels. Like, the Jaden Daniels being successful is not some shocking thing that nobody saw coming. We all understood the Jaden and the Caleb and the Drake and likely JJ all had the chance to do what they did last year. Like, we all saw that coming. I think if you just take all emotion away and you look at these quarterbacks, there are too many holes in their game for them to be justified as top 10 picks. I think if they were late first-round picks, you could turn around and say, okay, fine. To me, wins above replacement on this, I would much rather skip either of these quarterbacks and take a quarterback at the top of the second round that I'm taking a flyer on to see and take best player available at the top of the first.
So that being said, is Jackson Dart a quarterback that's on the move? They talk about toward the end of the season and the Senior Bowl, which was at least football. It wasn't shorts and a T-shirt where all of a sudden his value is jumping, which, my God, we're getting ready to do that whole spiel. But is Jackson Dart, do you think, going to make a move up?
I think Jackson Dart's agent's doing a really good job of convincing us all the Jackson. And look, kudos. We all know Jim Nagy with the Senior Bowl. Jim did not waste words telling everybody, oh, he's here. Like, the hype train is being rolled out very intentionally for Jackson Dart. The question I've been asking everybody is Jackson Dart closer to being Will Levis, somebody that we knew wasn't really going to go in the first round, but the name reputation was there? Or is he closer to being Bo Nix, somebody that a year ago we all saw moving up the boards? The answer I continually get from people is Bo Nix. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. I would feel a lot more comfortable with Jackson Dart in the second round than I would in the first, but he's going to climb, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him go in the middle of the first round. In fact, if I'm a team that's at need of the quarterback, if I'm the Giants or the Raiders, I'd be more comfortable trading down and just rolling the dice and say, okay, which quarterback can we get in the middle of the first round? Better value there. I'll take more picks. The problem is I just don't think that many people want to move up. This is not a move up draft, right? So it just feels like this concept of, well, somebody's going to trade the King's ransom with the Titans. No, they're not. No, nobody is trading future assets at the level that they traded for Bryce Young even to move up in this year's draft of the quarterback class. So you're better off just sitting where you are and taking what you got.
That is going to be the interesting part. Is I think we could have a pretty stale draft night when it comes to that, because the positions this year are a little bit less sexy than in years past, especially at quarterback. Although, to your point about Jackson Dart Fitz, my old college head coach, Charlie Weiss, whose son Charlie Weiss Jr. has been the offensive coordinator for Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. Charlie Weiss tweeted out on radio last year, I said as early as February that Jaden Daniels was my preference and that I couldn't understand why Bo Nix was not in the discussion with the top quarterbacks. This year's Bo Nix is Jackson Dart. Some team will be second guessed and then be very happy. So you have got some support there from a guy in Charlie Weiss who certainly knows a thing or two about quarterback talent making their way to the NFL. And I'm sure through his son Charlie Jr. has seen plenty of him. Coming up next, though, I want to look at one amazing race that we could be treated to and the future of college football at hand this week. Next on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jason Fitz here with you guys. And something that has been talked about a lot in the internet streets is apparently coming to fruition. We're hearing that Noah Lyles and Tyreek Hill are actually going to race. Now, this report comes from People, which I would argue is a reputable source. So, according to People, the race is officially on in either the spring or early summer. The location of the race is still being determined. Guys, I don't know. I feel like I'm interested in seeing this happen. How about you guys? Because I feel like they've just talked about this so much, and it's Noah Lyles' sort of only claim to relevancy currently, and I'm interested in seeing it go down.
Yeah, these guys both seem to like attention enough to where I do believe this is going to happen. And it is somewhat rare, to Jesse's point, Dad, because this is a day and age. We just talked about it with the NBA All-Star Game. A lot of high-profile athletes will avoid opportunities to be embarrassed publicly because they know the way the 24-hour news cycle works. We will take that opportunity and do something with it. So I'm not overly surprised to see these guys, and I'll definitely check it out. I mean, there's a curiosity that comes with this for you. What about you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would watch it because in today's world, it wouldn't take much attention span because it'll be a short race. The buildup will be way more than the race. And listen, Tyreek Hill was a track star in high school, and I believe he ran in college as well. And we know he hit, in 2016, 23 miles an hour on the field. But listen, let's be honest about this, Jason. The only shot that Tyreek Hill would have would be a 40-yard dash. That would be it. If he wants a 40, Lyles wants 100. 100, it wouldn't be close as far as the 100 goes. It may look close, but it wouldn't be close. So you wonder if they'll settle on 60. But I think 40 would, and I still don't think Tyreek would have a shot against Lyles because he's used to a fast start. You know, being in track now, he's going to get a fast start. And I just don't think Tyreek Hill is faster in a flat-out sprint than Lyles. So I don't see Tyreek Hill winning this. I see a big build-up, a lot of talk, and then a quick race that Lyles wins.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also, if I'm the Dolphins, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, I think we got to at least acknowledge right now that one of the teams that will have an insane amount of pressure on them next year are the Miami Dolphins. There is a level now where you're looking around saying, hey, is any of this good enough to get over the hump? And frankly, if you take Tyreek out of the equation at all, that's going to set the entire franchise back. I look at these situations. I think it just feels like unnecessary risk to hamstrings. That's all I keep thinking about is like you no matter how much you stretch, you're taking unnecessary risk to hamstrings, especially for Tyreek Hill, who has built his entire game on speed. All it takes is one little tweak that's bothering him into training camp, and all of a sudden we don't get the most out of Tua, and then before you know it, everybody's getting fired because the Dolphins didn't win enough games. Like, if I'm the Dolphins, I don't want Tyreek to have anything to do with this.
I mean, remember, this is already a Tyreek Hill that's kind of had to walk back the comments he made at the end of the season about the Miami Dolphins and will he, won't he be here. I saw Bill Barnwell pointing out that he could be a trade candidate with his contract. The Dolphins, if they wanted to go and try and get what they can for him at this point, could try and move on and reset some of that timeline that you just mentioned there. But I say this, my thoughts on this race changed a lot after I watched the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game because they had Masai Russell, the Olympic 100-meter gold medalist in that game, and they put her and the other Olympian against each other in one of those gimmick games in the middle. And when I saw her open up just running the open court on a basketball court, markedly shorter than anything that we're talking about here, it was a terrifying show of force. So I think Tyreek Hill is going to get smoked in this race. And listen, neither of these guys could do what the other's doing. Tyreek Hill is very fast. If you ask Noah Lyles to go out in an NFL field and get hit, he'd probably get folded up like a cheap chair. Like, everyone should respect what everyone's got to do.
Facts.
But man, seeing that kind of speed up close and personal at the All-Star Celebrity Game changed me fundamentally as a human being. I always said it's why we need to have a normie just in the middle of the Olympics so we can all get a little palate cleanse for how exactly insane what we're seeing athletically is. And that was it for me in that moment. So kudos to them. I hope we get to see it. It'd be something fun. We need more oddities like this in sports. And these two guys might be able to give it to us. I want to switch gears and talk about college football while we have Jason Fitz with us again. Does a great job over at Yahoo Sports. The College Football Power Hour is an awesome, awesome place to get a lot of your college football news. And some of the big news going on this week, Fitz, is we have got The SEC and the Big Ten meeting in New Orleans basically to decide the future of the sport. The college football playoff cannot meaningfully change until 2026. That's when the new part of this deal runs, and that's when we could get expansion and any number of things. And I don't think people realize, Fitz, that the last time around when we started reorganizing decision, the Big Ten and the SEC got all the decision-making power when it comes to the future of the sport. Yes, they have to consult these other teams here, and they're going to ask them for their input, but they don't actually have to take any of it now as they go out and decide whether or not we're going to have 12 teams or 14 teams or 16 teams in the playoff here, whether we're going to have the automatic bids going forward that it seems like now are almost an absolute certainty. So, Fitz, is this good for the sport, the place that we've wound up in right now? Is this daunting to you as we stare into the offseason?
No, it's not. I don't think it's good for the future of the playoff long term. Look, I understand why the Big Ten and the SEC have the power they have, and the fear is that they're going to take their ball and go home. And when they do that, the rest of the conferences will all be sitting here saying, well, who cares about us? I understand. But if you let fear make these decisions, the problem is in an automatic bid world where you want to give 4 automatic bids to the Big Ten and to the SEC, you do run the risk of a team simply not qualified making the college football playoff. And we can argue all day long about Alabama and what that would have meant this year. But I'm just looking back, even at last year's standings, like it wouldn't have taken that much for a team like Illinois in this situation to find their way in the college football playoff. I just don't think it's a great look if you end up with a 4 or 5 loss 4th place team in your conference suddenly automatically going to the college football playoff. It's just that to me, Mike, feels failed.
I agree. I absolutely agree. To give automatic slots, I think, is wrong. You just rank the teams and go by the ranking. If it's heavy Big Ten one year, so be it. If it's heavy SEC one year, so be it. If it's heavy Big 12 or ACC, so be it. I mean, I completely disagree with doing the what it would be for 16 teams is 4 each Big Ten SEC, 2 each ACC and Big 12, and then 1 for the highest ranking group of 5, and then 3 at large, which would include a reserve spot for Notre Dame if they were in the top 14. So it'd be a 4-4, 2-2, 1+1 plan, if, follow that. But Mike, I agree with Jason. I would not give 4 automatics from each or automatics from each because that could really be a letdown.
Yeah, now the people in support of this, cough the SEC and the Big Ten, would point out, and the statistics are there, since the 2014 playoff, the SEC has had 52 teams rank inside of the top 14 of the CFP rankings heading into conference championship weekend. So they've averaged about 4.7 teams a year. The Big Ten has averaged about 4.6, the Big 12 2.1, the ACC 1.8, and on and down the list. So this is designed with what we've seen as the last decade of the sport in mind. But I'm with you guys. This seems like an unnecessary overreaction to what we saw last year, which is the SEC feeling like their precious football boys didn't get all of what they wanted in the playoff field. And so now to Jason's point, they have the threat that everyone fears, which is we know those are the 2 most relevant conferences when it comes to the television dollars that this is all about. And if they decide to break off and do their own thing, everybody else is going to be a loser for this. And so they've got to operate in fear. It's the same thing on an even more macro level that we just saw with the ACC, where Florida State and Clemson and the big boys were able to kind of look at the rest of the conference and go, hey, listen, we're better than you guys, and we know it. And so you're going to give us more of this television money and rework it around in this deal that we just extended with ESPN because you know it too, and you want us to stick around here. And Jason, that seems like what the SEC and the Big Ten are getting ready to do now with this. It could lead to more conference games for the SEC. And so ultimately, I don't know. I've been one that's been hesitant to do too much of like doom and gloom, the sky is falling. But the one thing I do think is changing the sport like this every year and having meaningful changes, especially to the postseason structure, every couple of years, that's going to get exhausting. It's like what we see in these all-star games with the home run derby, the NBA all-star, where every year you're looking up going, what are the rules now? What are we supposed to do here? And I think across college football right now, that seems to be where most of the fan fatigue is coming from, which is we just don't feel like we have a handle on what we're watching in our sport year to year anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, especially because the narrative after this year was, well, the SEC is dead and they can't compete anymore. And to that, I've continually yelled, it's 1 year. I think we have to see how all of this plays out for more than 1 year before we make sweeping wholesale changes. And my concern when you start talking about automatic bids, like I went back and looked, the Big Ten In 2023, the fourth best team in Big Ten was number 24, Iowa, not a team that any of us were sitting here saying belonged in the college football playoff. In 2022, the fourth best team in the Big Ten was Purdue, who was 8-6 that year. Like, we want an 8-6 Purdue team getting an automatic bid in the college football playoff. I don't. Like, you keep going back. In 2021, the fourth best team was a 10-win Iowa team. Again, we're back to Iowa. Like, I don't look at any of that and say, wow, this is strength. So to me, rather than overreacting to 1 year of the expanded playoff, I do think that there's some value to, like, hey, everybody just stop. We're going to let this run for 5 years. We're going to see what happens when it normalizes, and then we're going to figure out how to move forward. Because my fear is that by overreacting and saying, okay, now we're going to have 4 Big Ten teams. What happens in 3 or 4 years if we find out the SEC is dead and 4 SEC caliber teams aren't really qualified for the college football playoff? Then everybody's going to be mad, and we're going to have to change it again. So I think that there is some level of, hey, we just changed the rules. Let's let everybody play in the sandbox for a little bit before we decide we need even more change on top of change.
Yeah, and we know the one change we kept talking, because this projected change is in 2026, so you have another year next year, this college football season to live off what went last football season. And the one change we all screamed that should happen is no automatic buys for the conference champions. But that's not going to change, Mike, right? Because that needs a unanimous vote. And the group of 5 conferences aren't going to vote to have a chance that their group of 5 team doesn't get a bye. So they're not going to vote that. So we're going to get the exact same format, I think, for this coming year before it possibly changes in 2026.
Well, yeah, and then after that, we don't need unanimous anything anymore. We need Papa and Mama Big Ten and SEC to tell us what the future of the sport's going to look like, and then we all just sit there and line up for our gruel. That seems to be what the formula is going to be going forward, because unanimous decision, that's going to be a thing of the past come 2026. So enjoy it while you can here, I guess. The other thing that's up for debate, Jason, is it sounds like they are going to try and come away with this with a little bit more in terms of guidelines of what the revenue share version of the sport looks like coming up in the next couple of seasons, because we're going to see more money coming out than ever before with the combination of NIL and the revenue share. That ruling that came down the other week in reference to Title IX, where now the prior administration, the Biden administration's ruling on Title IX being something that applies to the revenue sharing dollars, where, hey, that $20 million a year that we heard about coming in from TV contracts that would go to athletes was originally going to be subject to Title IX. Now it appears is not going to be, and they're going to be able to do what we thought they would do, earmark it for football, men's and women's basketball, and whatever sports are most profitable on that campus, which, Jason, where did you stand on that? Quickly, we got about a minute left here. I actually, when that first came out, thought that kind of defeated the purpose of the free market conversation that we had been having, and that schools should be allowed to divvy that money up where they want it. But where were you at on that?
Yeah, no, 100%. And the hard part about this is that I want Title IX, non-revenue generating sports, Olympic sports is something I've helped fight to keep at other schools. I've been parts of these conversations, and I think it's important. But also, you just got to be real at some point. Like, if a bunch of money is coming in from NIL for football, to ask that suddenly to fund, the swimming department is not realistic. So I think schools have to figure out how to better allocate the money that they have. They got to figure out how to prioritize the sports that they want to prioritize. But to me, you can't start limiting these. Every time you limit a football player's ability to make money, they will simply sue in court and they will win. They've won every single time. So when fans hate that, I just have to remind you loudly, the legal system is not on your side. Throttling back, any version of throttling back market value, whether it's you're part of the scholarships count or they should just be happy getting what they get. Like, you guys have all lost that legally in court. So stop trying.
And I agree with you. I said for years that system, while it's existed for a long time, never quite sat right, knowing what we were asking from a select group of players to subsidize everybody else. At Jason Fitz on social media is where you can check him out. Yahoo Sports is where you can watch and listen to him. Fitzy, we appreciate it, buddy. Glad you're feeling better here. Go enjoy the rest of the day.
Hanging out with you guys always makes me feel better. Ha ha.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. So we know by now that the new Jets brass have decided to part ways with Aaron Rodgers. Hearing a little more about how it all went down. Apparently, Aaron Rodgers pleaded with the Jets to keep him, according to the New York Post. He said he aggressively urged New York to keep him for 1 or 2 more years. Once a decision was made, though, Rodgers reportedly accepted it and slipped into the darkness for a few days. Okay. I mean, that sounds absolutely correct. I believe that 100%. Do you guys believe that this was the right move? Kind of seems like the Jets are finally making some smart decisions. Like, also, I would have paid to be in the room to hear Aaron Rodgers begging for his job. I don't like him.
Yeah, it is an interesting place. If you had told someone a decade ago, eventually Aaron Rodgers will beg the New York Jets to continue to let him play football, your head probably would have exploded. But here we are, and Dad, I understand this from the Jets. From a practical standpoint, when you think just the on-paper football stuff, quarterback abyss this offseason, not a lot of great options ready for you, Aaron Glenn taking over as a new head coach. Aaron Rodgers, or what Aaron Rodgers represents as a veteran quarterback past his prime, but a year removed from an injury that certainly hampered him last year, could be a viable option. But when you remember that Aaron Rodgers is a much bigger lightning rod than that, and sort of the personality questions that we asked at the end of Cam Newton's career and what he would be inside a locker room, where this is a guy that's been on a microphone every Tuesday, that's brought a lot of attention to the Jets at a time where they didn't always want it while they were struggling. Even if he's well-liked in the building, I can absolutely understand why Aaron Glenn and this new administration would say, we don't want those problems right now. We understand that we have some rebuilding to do, and we would like to do it with just the normal attention of the New York media and not everybody else parachuting in off Tuesdays with McAfee every week.
Yeah, new head coach, and by the way, first-time head coach, new GM, you have to start fresh. I mean, this isn't a Mike Vrabel situation. This isn't a Pete Carroll situation where you have former coaches taking over head coaching jobs who could probably deal with it or live through this situation better than a brand new coach who's wants to find his own way. I don't think you can do that with Aaron Rodgers kind of there, whether he's a starter or even worse if he's the backup. Because we know the backup position, quarterback position, especially with the name of Aaron Rodgers, you just wonder how it's all going to play out. Even though Aaron said, if he had said he's willing to mentor the next quarterback and be a backup, I don't know if he said any of that. I still think he thinks of himself as a starter. And if he's in the building, that's going to be the thought process. I have a hard time believing anybody will bring in Aaron Rodgers and say, Aaron, you're the backup. You're going to mentor this young quarterback. You're the backup. I just don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth the possible downside of that situation.
That's what the totality of the situation makes me wonder about a team like the Las Vegas Raiders. Like, if we're going to look at some of the teams that have openings this offseason and some of the veterans there, I think we can look at vet or reset as the options for these teams and what they should do here. And a team like the Las Vegas Raiders is a fascinating potential landing spot. They could be within range for these quarterbacks if they fall in the draft and take one of those guys. But, Dad, you mentioned Pete Carroll being there as a guy that is used to driving two hands on the wheel in an organization with big personalities, would not be daunted by what he gets with Aaron Rodgers. And so if we talk about Las Vegas or Tennessee as teams that could potentially kick the tires on Aaron Rodgers, I do think that Pete Carroll would absolutely be in a good position to absorb that and be able to deal it.
So then you talk about what's the best option of quarterback that's available. You have Russell Wilson available. You have Justin Fields available. Now, Pittsburgh will probably hang on to one, probably Justin Fields. You have Aaron Rodgers. You have Sam Darnold. Do you have Matthew Stafford available? Do you have Kirk Cousins available? If you have all those available and you are going to grab one of them to be your starter this year, which one do you take? I mean, that's well, especially coming off a very weak quarterback class in the draft.
I would say this, wildly different numbers for all of those, right? Like, you are probably going to be able to get Aaron Rodgers for a bargain at this point. Sam Darnold going to cost you probably a lot of money at this point in time. Matthew Stafford would cost you a lot in resources, because if we're just grading on ability, if we erase the price tag, Matthew Stafford is overwhelmingly the answer. He is far and away the best quarterback on the board if you remove the price tag from it and just say, who do I want to roll the ball out with on a team, position agnostic everywhere else. If you're just making it league replacement, the roster's all even, I want Matthew Stafford hands down. And if you're the New York Giants or one of these teams, I absolutely understand you picking up the phone and trying to see, hey, do the Rams want to get out of this early as opposed to be too late to this decision, the way some teams that have gotten themselves in trouble in the past are? He would absolutely be my choice, Dad. I don't know if you see that differently.
No, that would be my choice, but you would give up assets for you're right. A Russell Wilson, a Justin Fields, they're free agents. Aaron Rodgers probably going to be a free agent, not going to cost you a lot. Sam Darnold will cost you a lot, but you won't have to give up any assets for it, as long as obviously if he's not tagged. It would be Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford that you would have to give up some assets. Now, I don't think you would have to give up many assets for Kirk Cousins, and I'm not sure what team may trade for him, an older quarterback coming off an Achilles, kind of like Aaron Rodgers as well. It is without a doubt Matthew Stafford, strip everything away as the quarterback. And then also, as far as youth, it's Sam Darnold and Justin Fields, right? Now, I think Justin Fields is going to be with Pittsburgh, so it's really Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is going to cost you some money. Are you going to – and the last two games, I think, cost him some money, and they were big games where – now, again, he got in one of the games, he got sacked 9 times, so that's not all on him. Some on him, but not all on him. But what he did win 14 games or contributed to 14 games, but then we saw the revert back a little bit at the end of the season. So that could have the biggest upside, but also the biggest, downside as well, because you're talking about $35-40 million a year.
Yeah, a big commitment and a deal that I think Jason Fitz outlined appropriately is probably going to mirror what we saw for a couple of years ago in New York with the quarterback. There is a deal that is front-loaded in the first 2 years, a deal that has most of its guaranteed money then, and that you could probably pull the ripcord out of if all of a sudden you find yourself in that Daniel Jones situation where you've got a little bit of buyer's remorse there. I think ultimately, Dad, the Rams are too smart to do this, and unless they can get a haul, the team that's interested, like the Giants shouldn't do this. The Giants roster is too far away from being competitive to have Matthew Stafford inserted there and expect it to win. Pittsburgh Steelers are a different story. That could be a really interesting one if they could do anything to pry him out of there. They desperately need an influx of talent at the quarterback position. They're in a division that demands that, and that could be a team that with Mike Tomlin's coaching, to me, would be an interesting landing spot. I don't know what they'd have to give up and how that would affect their ability to compete in the AFC North, but that's the one team I look at The Rams should not let that happen. And for everybody else here, the Giants probably going to be a team where they sit that could be the beneficiary of a more, I'd say, lukewarm view of this quarterback class in the draft as they try and reset there. But the Jets and a lot of these other teams, Dad, I think are just going to have to concede. We're probably going to be shuffling the deck on some of these guys here. I think Kirk Cousins becomes really interesting. A year removed from that Achilles injury. Is someone going to take a flyer on him after Atlanta likely cuts him this offseason and say bargain bin Kirk Cousins coming in at a place like Tennessee where maybe you bring him in the room, try and help him corral the worst tendencies of Will Levis, and if he can go out there and move a little bit better, then you've got a productive quarterback at a much lesser price than Atlanta had.
It seems to be the year of the bridge quarterback, right? With Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins. Sam Darnold could be there a couple of years, but it does seem to be the year of the bridge quarterback until the better class of quarterbacks comes through in the draft. Because you'd certainly like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders to sit for a year, but you may not have that luxury.
And there is nothing wrong with a bridge over troubled water here. Bridges get a bad rap in this conversation with quarterback here. Bridges can help bring you towards a brighter tomorrow. They have great value, and so many of these quarterbacks do as well. Coming up next, we will finish off the show the way we always do with this, that, the third, and the most dominant force in women's college basketball. Next on Gojo and Golic. All right, let's finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. Download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you subscribe and hit the bell on the Gojo and Golic YouTube channel as well to check out all of our shows here. Thank you to our guests that you can check out there today as well. David Dennis Jr. from Anscape and ESPN, the co-host of Love is Kind, stopping by to help us fix the NBA All-Star Game, sort of, and look at the second half of the season. And our buddy Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. You missed that? Check it out wherever you get the podcast. Check it out on the YouTube channel. All of those fun places. Guys, been waiting all day to talk about this. Let's start off with this. The number 1 ranked women's basketball team in all of the land, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, went out there and put a stamp on that brand new rating. The UCLA Bruins, who had been sitting pretty at number 1, lost to USC over the weekend. And so Notre Dame moved up to the number 1 spot and immediately got to host Carol Lawson's number 11 Duke Blue Devils in South Bend. And the game was hotly contested for the first half of this game.
Yeah.
Credit to the Duke defense. They were stifling, bothered the Notre Dame backcourt of Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo. And then a 17-1 run happened to come out of that halftime locker room, and the rest was history. Notre Dame goes on to win by over 20 points in a game that firmly stamps that number 1 rating, Dad, and now becomes their 18th straight win this season. Just a remarkable run, as Niele Ivey and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish now ranked number 1 for the first time since 2019, back when Muffet McGraw was still at the helm for this team.
Quick math, they won by 15, not over 20, but that's okay. I know you struggle with simple math. This was a first quarter 19-16 lead for Duke, and then Duke's second and third quarter, they scored 8 points in each, 16 total points in the second and third quarter. That's where Notre Dame pulled away. Hannah Hidalgo had 19, Maddie Westbeld had 11, Sonia Citron had 15, and they have won 18 in a row. They last lost in November. This is the hottest team in women's college basketball, maybe in all of college basketball, on the run that they are on right now. They've already projected like number 1 seeds, be South Carolina, Notre Dame.
Which, by
Texas.
the way, South Carolina coming off a loss. It was South Carolina, UCLA, Texas, and Notre Dame with UConn, by the way. And as again, we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
Ozzie Fudd coming back and the way that team looked, beating the brakes off of South Carolina within range. But I saw the metrics over the weekend. South Carolina not punished at all, still expected to be widely one of the top seeds there. And Notre Dame barely getting in as the 4 seed right now as they release the bracket this weekend, or the 4th number 1 seed, I should say, was ridiculous. That's the best team in women's college basketball. Y'all need to grow up and recognize, all right? This is ridiculous that we even have to have this conversation. The 2 losses that Notre Dame had, by the way, all right, I'm not. I go back and look. Utah, Hannah Hidalgo was in the lineup. I thought she might have been out for those. She had a couple of injuries in the early part of the season. Either way, Dad, as dominant a team as we've seen in a while in South Bend.
The lineup they started yesterday is undefeated this year. The lineup they started yesterday is undefeated this year. So listen, if they win out, they're going to be the number 1 seed overall, without question. If they win out. But we'll have to wait and see. But they are loaded this year. They're a fun team. Hannah Hidalgo is just the energizer buddy. She just is nonstop.
That will be interesting to see if they do. They get on the road at Miami, a game at NC State, going to be a big one for a team that's traditionally been a tough out for Notre Dame and, both the ACC tournament and otherwise. And then Florida State and Louisville as they go through and get ready for them, the ACC tournament and all those things. But either way, Notre Dame gets to light Grace Hall. For anyone unfamiliar with, Grace Hall on campus has a big number 1 that's lit up with a bunch of lights. And anytime a team on campus is ranked number 1 in their respective sport, they light up the number 1 on top of Grace Hall. Notre Dame gets to light it twice because we are home to the best women's college basketball team and the most dominant force of nature's fury, our men's college lacrosse team, still sitting pretty 2-0 to start the season after mollywhopping Marquette. So you'll hear more about that from us, rest assured, because I tell you what, they should have never given me good teams, because the minute they did, they handed me the key to a bunch of bleep talking that I've been waiting years to unleash. So why don't we get away from this for the safety of everyone else, Jesse, and get to that? What do we got?
Yeah, okay, so before match number 6 of TGL, Tommy Fleetwood made a hole-in-one. So he teed up again during the actual match, almost made the same shot, didn't end up making it. But this is a debate. I want to know. I'm not a golfer. I need to know from you guys. Are you telling people you hit a hole-in-one if it was on a sim and a practice round of a sim at that? Like, does this count? No.
I don't think
listen,
so.
For someone that would talk all kinds of bleep if I ever got a hole-in-one, I can't, in good conscience, on a simulator, let alone practice on a simulator, getting a hole-in-one. And I think it bounced off a rock on the simulator and went in the hole. So that would be a tough one for me to stand on my soapbox and scream about. I certainly am not buying drinks for everybody like you normally would have to do if you hit a hole in one. You got to go spend your own hard-earned money and buy drinks for everybody. I sure as hell ain't doing that.
No, definitely not. So I think it's the best of both worlds. Like, it's definitely something that you tell people about, but I don't think you can then say, especially if you were a person that didn't have a hole-in-one on their resume before that, I don't think you can put your hand up and then say, yes, I've got a hole-in-one. I hit it on a golf simulator here. TGL had themselves a day. They put a bunch of matches together over the course of one day on President's Day and really seemed to TGL overall, Dad, seems to be holding attention, I think, better than a lot of people may have anticipated.
I agree. I mean, because they have stars. They have stars in from the tour that are playing, and it's kind of quick. And the shots, they have a shot clock on it, so it keeps moving pretty quickly. You have actually obviously hitting into the simulator, but then playing it onto the green, actual chipping and putting. Yeah, I think it's definitely holding some interest.
Ludwig Oberg came over, had a big day, won at Torrey Pines at the Genesis Invitational there, came back over and was a part of a win at TGL. So it's all going really well there. But again, that ace, again, it's an asterisk. We talk about asterisks in sports all the time. I think that is firmly a hole-in-one with a major asterisk on it that everybody would understand. Jesse, let's get to the third here and do some geography on the way out.
Yeah, so stupid Americans can't locate states on a map, but it turns out Swedes have a little trouble with geography too.
Boxford.
I know where that is.
What? Can you find Boxford? A teammate of yours.
Yes.
Chris Kreider. I mean, he's from the Boston area, right? Oh God.
That is.
You know where New York is because you live there.
No, that's North Carolina.
It's somewhere around here.
It's
where the B is. Up where the B is.
You live in New York City. Do you know where you live?
It's
where do you live?
Okay, it's here.
Hey,
so
you're eating your words now.
Here.
Oh my God, you're not even on the right.
Not really.
Why did I get the Swedish map?
This
I'm
is
from
USA.
Sweden. Yeah, but I should be asked about Sweden.
It doesn't matter, Hank, because they have Anchorage south. So it doesn't matter.
All right.
Good thing you could stop pucks.
Anyway, all right.
So I guess he placed his marker somewhere on Virginia. But to be fair, you guys, all the states get really small and squished together right there in that, New England area.
Well, this is a good reminder. So Henrik Lundqvist, who obviously played, is in New York, right there. Next to all of this going on here, as pointed out, Swedish, so not as familiar with the U.S. map despite living there. To me, Dad, this is a great reminder, and by the way, great intermission fodder in general by the fellows at TNT. New York, very much not New England. And the New York elitism that showed up here for Boston fans that want to act like Massachusetts is that thing to write home about. You got this reminder. We are not like them, and they do not believe that they are like us. I have often said no state in New England is special enough to exist on its own. It should all be lumped together. Boston should be the capital of New England, and it should be one all-state, because unless you are actually from there, and again, this is the reminder, New York is not from there, I don't expect you to know the geography of all these weird little states.
But I'll say this. The hope of the smart America is with my grandson, Jackson Golic, 2.5 years old. You can put a blank United States map up there, and he can name every single state. They talk about dumb Americans right now. Jackson is the hope and the future of America's smarts for his ability to identify a state.
You hear that, Henrik? You might be able to stop pucks. My new 2.5-year-old nephew can name states. Download, subscribe, rate, review. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.